Purpose of this short video is to share a summary of our discussion on personality. One thing to note right away is that personality is a relatively stable organization of characteristics. It's deeply ingrained. It's not really a subject of nature or nurture. It's actually a consequence of both, generally thought to be formed at an early age. We tend to think of personality not as mood, emotions, feelings, opinions, etc. These things change over time. Personality, as we know it, is much more stable. There are several myths associated with personality, including the notion that personality changes over time or changes with the environment. Behavior may change, but personality, as we know, it tends to be relatively stable. There's lots of ways to measure personality. You may hear things like the Rorschach Inkblot test or the thematic apperception test. These are projective measures. We're not asking participants to describe their personalities directly. We're interpreting information they provide us and trying to make a judgment. There's also some objective measures associated with specific traits. Again, you may be familiar with the Myers-Briggs. I'll refer primarily to the Big Five trait taxonomy, which is the one that's been most highly researched, for which there is the most sound scientific evidence. From the Rorschach Inkblot test, we'll see some others from the thematic apperception test. The idea behind these particular measures is to have someone tell a story about what they see, and from the patterns of descriptions we can make some judgment about individual traits. Like all other measures, we expect that measures of personality should be reliable, valid, specific, strategically congruent, but they should also be legal. And I'll explain a couple examples where personality measures might be illegal and violate some civil rights. Reliability is calculated in terms of measurement repetitions. We can achieve that by having multiple items that are meant to assess similar concepts. We do multiple personality assessments over time and have different raters make judgments. And again, there's lots of different selection measures and ways to determine how someone how fit someone might be for a job, including resumes and interviews. But there's also cognitive ability tests and personality inventories, which we'll discuss. Here's an example of the ability test in the New York Police Department. This is the criteria used to make a selection. You can see where this would be relevant for some jobs, but not others. I make note that the cognitive ability tests are widely used, and they're used because they're so valid. Here's some evidence that suggests intelligence is related to both performance on the job and training performance. We showed a video of the Wonderlic test, an example of how it's used. 50 questions in 12 minutes. It's used in the NFL regularly as one indicator of a player's ability to comprehend a lot of information. You can see what the cutoff scores are for different positions. And here's some other suggested hiring cutoffs for common occupations. Again, it's an IQ test measuring general cognitive ability. It's used because it's very valid. General mental ability is correlated with job performance, especially correlated with complex jobs, less so with semi-skilled jobs. And you can see some other important correlations associated with GPA. You can also see that education level correlates somewhat with job performance, as does GPA and other things. The point to be made here is that we can get a sense of how valid certain measures are, such as IQ tests and personality briefs, in part by how strongly they're related to important job-related indicators such as performance and job satisfaction. Let's move to personality. The most commonly used objective measure of personality, I should say the most research, is the Big Five. Essentially captures the traits that are inherent in people's individual differences, their behavior. The Big Five personality traits are things like extroversion, conscientiousness, and here's some descriptions of them there. You know what extroverts are like and what conscientious people are like. Two other traits include openness to experience and agreeableness. And you'll see neuroticism here in a minute. These are important traits that characterize the way people behave and relate to others. Neuroticism is the one that's more emotional than the others. Now again, the most important research about this has been conducted to identify the stability of individual traits, and what this chart shows is the correlation between identical twins. as it relates to the Big Five is stronger than the correlation between fraternal twins. This is evidence that suggests personality has a dispositional and genetic source. This chart shows correlations of identical twins, their body mass index. Even though they're real apart, you see the red the red bar, high correlation between identical twins, which suggests body mass index is a function of genetics. It's also the case for emotional traits like depression. Identical twins tend to have higher correlations for depressive tendencies than fraternal twins, further indicating that both physical and emotional traits have a genetic source. Finally, this chart shows the stability of personality over time. Again, this is evidence that suggests personality is established early and remains pretty persistent over time. Finally, this table summarizes some of the primary correlates of life satisfaction or someone's general happiness. And you see the variation of all these different things like income and occupation. And what emerges is how important personality is. Again, this personality is a dispositional source. There's evidence to suggest it's somewhat genetic and persistent over time. And the reason it's used and valid is it's correlated with important outcomes like job performance and even life satisfaction. Hope this helps.